So you've heard all this hype about a technical photographer versus a creative photographer. What's the difference between the two? Let's find out. I once heard someone say a long time ago, don't get so close to the camera that you can't see the composition. And I think what that means is when you're fiddling around with your settings and your camera and you're more worried about the camera itself, you lose sight of the composition. And if you watch my channel for any length of time, you probably come to realize that it's all about nature and the experience and being outdoors, but it's about capturing a great composition. So the camera and all of that, all the equipment and gear is second. So I think that's an important takeaway. But I want to read this quote by Ansel Adams. I read this a little while back and it really stuck with me. You don't make a photograph just with a camera. You bring to the act of photography all the pictures you've seen, all the books you've read, all the music you've heard, and all the people you've loved. I think that really encapsulates what the photograph is all about, the image that we're out trying to capture. So the question of what's the difference between a technical photographer and a creative photographer is really it's a moot point. I mean, there is no difference between the two. You're either a photographer or you're not. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, someone could be so caught up in their camera that they're more interested in kind of the technical aspect of the camera. But any serious photographer that I know, it's not about the camera or the settings. It's about the photograph, the image. And in order to capture the vision that we have to have the right tools. It's no different than a painter painting a big canvas. Do they use oil paints? Do they use acrylic paints? What paints do they use? And they choose their paints because these are the tools that they feel are going to help them really portray or put on paper their vision. And that's, I think, what a photographer tries to do, is you try to put your vision, try to capture your vision with the camera. And it's no different than a paintbrush. So to answer the question, the technical photographer versus the creative photographer, I think it's just something that's been created just to draw a line and this distinction between two different kinds of people. But in fact, you're either an artist or you're not. And I really like to think of myself, yeah, I'm a photographer, I'm a landscape photographer, but it's about creating the image. It's not as simple as just walking up to a scene and pulling your camera out and snapping some photographs. That's not what it's all about. It's about evaluating the scene. You walk onto the scene, you have an idea of the image that you want to capture, and you base that idea on maybe the weather patterns. I was looking at the weather this morning and what was I going to expect when I got down here, and I already had this vision, having been here before, of what I wanted to create. And I needed a certain lens for that, a certain focal length. I needed a camera that would operate in low light conditions. So I needed these tools, and more importantly, I needed to know how to use these tools in order to capture this vision. But the point is that I had this preconceived vision of what this image was going to be, and I wanted to capture it with the tools that I had. So I think from the technical perspective, you want to know your gear. I don't want to be fiddling around with the camera trying to figure out how to dial in my ISO, or how to set the white balance, or whether I'm going to shoot JPEG or RAW. I mean, I think any serious photographer is shooting RAW because it gives them more control over every aspect of the image, over the color, over what we're going to do with the image and how we're going to process it, and whether we're going to expose to the right and give ourselves more options in Photoshop, because maybe we're going to do a double processing. And which is probably what I'm going to do with this image. So I can bring out the details of the sky so that I can make the image look like the vision that I had. And that was the vision of the marina with a beautiful sky, and the compositional elements balanced, so to try to bring the viewer in with the leading lines of the pier, the reflection, or the lights, the reflections of the lights in the water. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into the composition, and it's not just that there's two different kinds of people. There's those that have no artistic ability whatsoever, and they're just technical gurus. The fact is, and this may be inconvenient for some people, and I'm not trying to upset anyone, I'm just saying that I personally don't think there's a difference. I don't think there's a technical photographer and there's a artist or creative photographer. I think you're either a photographer or you're not. And if you're a photographer, chances are You know about the rule of thirds, you know about compositional elements and balance, bringing balance to a scene, and you're simply using the tools to achieve that. And so there really is no difference. But the thing is, and the simple truth is this, is that you're either good at composing an image or you're not, or you're working on it, you're aspiring to do it. There is a learning curve to it. There's a lot to learn to it. And I think that it's not just the photographer wants to come to the scene and pull out their camera and see how well they can execute settings on their camera. They're using those settings to achieve the looks that they want in their image, to make their vision come to actually pop on screen, and make themselves happy, or make their viewers happy, or whatever their goals and ambitions are and whatever they're trying to achieve. I don't think you can be a creative photographer without being a technical photographer. And I'll give a good analogy of that. Imagine a painter, any famous painter. Painting a masterpiece is not done without knowing the difference between oil-based paints, acrylic paints, watercolors, brush types, textures in their compositions, and how they want to do that and how they want to achieve it. And a photographer is no different. You simply have to know your camera in order to do those things. You can't come away with a waterfall that has a beautifully blurred image that gives the impression that water is flowing but still has texture in the image. You have to think about how you're going to do that. You can't capture a really high dynamic range situation with a camera that's just not capable of doing it, and then expect to be able to print a 3-foot image. You're not going to be able to do those things. So you have to be a technical photographer also. And I think that's my point. And I'll leave you with that. The bottom line is there's really no difference. You're either a creative photographer or you're not. And if you are a creative photographer, then you certainly know how to use your camera, and you certainly know how to dial in settings to achieve the effects that you want, to come away with the vision that you've thought of likely beforehand. So that's my push, and I'll leave it at that. Well, I hope I was able to shed some light on a creative photographer versus a technical photographer. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, but hey, if you like the video, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you're notified of any future videos that I post. And maybe leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought. And as always, if I don't see you down the road, maybe I'll see you on the trail. The combination of technical knowledge and imagination provides the secret formula necessary to transform one's vision into a work of art. Although the image is far from perfect, they seldom are, the contrasty, multicolored skies complement the subject and help to convey the story and set the tone. The pier and pilings gradually lead my eyes through the image and to the red and golden skies, rendering a nautical ambience that brings me back to memories of time spent on and near the sea. Overall, I'm pleased with the results. This image met my expectations. However, I'm not finished with this marina, as I plan to return and once again challenge the creative and technical photographer within.